Let's go stateside now and talk about what's been going on in the US presidential election. Election day is now less than a month away on November the 5th. And finally, Kamala Harris has done another TV interview. That was nice of her. She's done so few, even at her time as VP, certainly as a presidential candidate. Let's talk about that with Steve Gill. He's a former advisor to both Clinton and W. Bush administrations. Good morning to you, Steve.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Very well indeed. Thank you for joining us. Now, I've not had a chance to look at what Kamala Harris had to say in this interview with CBS's 60 Minutes. It's a big sort of set-piece interview. We've got a couple of clips. Let's just play, first of all, what she had to say on the issue of Ukraine, asked by the CBS news anchor Bill Whitaker about the war in Ukraine. This is what they had to say.
As president, would you support the effort to expand NATO to include Ukraine?
Those are all issues that we will deal with if and when it arrives at that point. Right now, we are supporting Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russia's unprovoked aggression. Donald Trump, if he were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. He talks about, oh, he can end it on day one. You know what that is? It's about surrender.
Well, she reckons that Ukraine is much safer with her in the White House. What did you make of what she had to say, Steve?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, she really didn't have an answer. That's a hypothetical I'm not going to answer. And then if you pay attention to that, you'll know there was a couple of cuts. The whole interview, they completely edited it time and time again. So as abysmal as this was the best they could get by editing the interview and the clip.
Well, hold on a minute. So it's we knew it was a pre-recorded interview. It wasn't it wasn't live, but it wasn't even as live. It wasn't they sat down and then they had a break. No. And so, wow, that is very
look
telling.
At that clip. He's asking her, she's answering about hypotheticals, and then all of a sudden it's a different camera from a different angles where she starts attacking Donald Trump, saying that Putin would be in Kyiv. They cut and edited this. It was still a disaster, but this was the best disaster they could edit it to.
And this has been the criticism of her, that she hasn't done many interviews even as vice president, because basically she's not very good at this. We saw when she was being acclaimed as the candidate when Biden stepped down, was pushed aside cruelly, although rightly, that it was all just about the Kamala vibe, wasn't it? It was all her being surrounded by cheering, hysterical people and the Oprah Winfreys. But you never actually hear what she actually thinks about anything or what she'd do about anything, or standing by her own track record and borders are, etc., etc. This is the closest we've got to anything in depth. The interesting thing is, of course, I worry that she would be more solid on Ukraine than Donald Trump, but I think she'd be less solid on the Middle East than Donald Trump. So that's a concern for me.
Well, I think it's legitimate concern about every issue. And to his credit, Bill Whitaker, the host, actually pushed back and followed up on questions. I know you guys have been very concerned about illegal immigration there in the UK. He pressed her 3 times on whether letting millions and millions of illegals into the country was a bad idea. She dodged and weaved and wouldn't answer that. At one point, he asked her about, well, we've been told you own a gun. And she goes, yes, I own a Glock. And then in typical body language fashion, she started laughing nervously because she was lying.
Well, we understand she does. She and Tim Walz, her VP candidate, do both have guns. Let's have a little watch and listen to that little clip there.
What kind of gun do you own, and when and why did you get it?
I have a Glock, and I've had it for quite some time. And, I mean, look, Bill, my background is in law enforcement. And so there you go.
Have you ever fired it?
Yes. Of course I have. At a shooting range. Yes, of course I have.
Yeah, again, just all the interviews, all exchanges with her, Steve, they're always just a bit weird, aren't they? So, so there you go. Now, there's an element of discomfort of saying, I've got a gun when you're a Democrat, because Democrats very sort of pro-gun control. But again, Democrats aren't actually opposed to people owning guns at all. It's about having controls, quite rightly, in my view, most sane people's view, around who can buy a gun. Criminals, violent people, drug addicts and all that, but of mentally ill. But she's clearly trying to sort of reassure people, the floating voters, that she's not I'm going to take your guns away from you person. But that wasn't comfortable.
Well, and she has said, I'm going to take your guns away, until she flip-flops into I'm not. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about this one, Julia, Washington, D.C., where she lives as vice president, requires gun registration. There's no indication she's registered the gun. So is it in Washington? If it's in California, a Glock has been deemed an unhealthy, unsafe gun by Kamala Harris when she was Attorney General. So does she have an unsafe gun? And why didn't he ask her, does it have a safety? Because Glocks don't have an external safety. She wouldn't have been able to answer that question. And claiming that, well, I'm law enforcement. No, law enforcement officials go and do gun training and shoot. Yeah. She was an assistant DA.
That's not law enforcement. No, it did. That's fascinating how that's unravelled. It really is. Can I ask you, I mean, just in terms of, well, Donald Trump, they said they asked him for an interview. They claim he said yes at CBS. He says he never agreed to do an interview. I don't know why he wouldn't do an interview because, look, he can come unstuck during interviews as well. I mean, the main takeaway for me is I just think both of these people are just not up to the job.
Well, the crazy thing about Kamala Harris is this is the worst of the interviews she's done. She went on a sex podcast called Call Me Daddy that she filmed with a woman who talks about how women can improve their sexual proficiencies while people were dying in a hurricane. She taped that one. Now she's going on with Colbert doing comedy shows and with a comedic radio host who has worn blackface and used the N-word. These are the people she's interviewing with right now.
That's going to go well. However, of course, we know the mainstream media in America, other than Fox News, basically, completely and utterly devoted to the Democrat cause. Media is so partisan now in America.
Here's how you know she's lost, though. Saturday Night Live actually parodied her and brutalized her on Saturday Night Live about the debate. They asked her, she's like sitting there with a great actress that looked just like her husband. And he's saying, oh, don't worry about it. Tim Walz is going to do great in this VP debate. And then they have the Walz character say, I'm friends with school shooters, to which she crushes her wine glass that breaks in her hand. When you've lost Saturday Night Live as a Democrat, you've lost.
That's very interesting. Of course, it's still neck and neck in the polls. We'll see how things go. I know we'll talk to you many more times over the next month. And who knows, maybe after the election as well, depending on whether we get a result on the day or not, because we've had that a few times, have we not, Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Thank you very much indeed for that.